Welcome back to Business Deals and Real Talk with the Choes. I'm your host, Holly Che, and joining me today is my co-host, Jonathan Che.
Great to be here with you, Holly, and I'm excited about today's conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, today we have a special guest, Valerie Wilson. She's the founder of Eagle Eye Accounting. Valerie specializes in bookkeeping and business planning services tailored for fitness industry, yoga studios, etc. And she can talk a little bit more about that. Her expertise does help business owners streamline their financial process and make informed decisions. So, Valerie, welcome to the show. Is there anything that I didn't cover? Feel free
No, I
to.
think that's a good overview, and thank you for having me. Really excited to be here and excited for the conversation.
All right, Valerie, to start, can you give us an overview of your experience working with business owners and particularly within the fitness industry?
Well, so I kind of come from a not a traditional accounting background. I'm not a CPA or anything, but have some experience in different industries. So I worked for a long time starting in the 90s, an accounting software company that did accounting for construction businesses and specifically a lot of job costing, and was a consultant, was in customer support for a while, and then did a lot of on-site consulting and implementation. And so working with larger businesses, but a lot of the businesses were smaller too. And I was working with a lot of them were family owned, so business owners in that realm. And then actually went on to get into the travel and hospitality world. I worked for Visit Bend for 15 years, which is more in the marketing space, obviously the tourism bureau for Bend, Oregon, and really did the business side of that organization. It's, most of the other people were in marketing, and I was kind of the business admin, finance person, did some HR as well, and learned a lot about just the smaller business owners in the area. Obviously wasn't doing accounting specifically for them, but just getting to know kind of the community and working with a lot of small businesses there. And my specialization now kind of stems from, I started my bookkeeping practice and fractional CFO about a year ago. And my interest in working with business owners of gyms and in fitness studios really stems from a personal passion I have. I'm a gym person. It's meant a lot to me socially, and I'm not a very great athlete, but I love CrossFit, and I also do powerlifting, and just those communities are really important to me. And just over the years, just being involved with different local gyms, I've gotten to know the owners and their challenges, and really thought that's a space where I could really combine some of my personal interests and also fill a need for, gym owners. If you might imagine, I don't think specifically get into that world to be sitting behind the desk crunching numbers, and thought I could offer a contribution kind of to that area of owning the reality of owning a business. So I do have other clients in other different types of industries and enjoy working with them as well, but I really am hoping to kind of grow my knowledge and effectiveness in working with fitness industry owners specifically.
Thank you for that. I love that because that's a great point. Business owners, when they get into a business or, they enjoy, whatever the passion is, whether it is, a fitness center because they enjoy working out, they enjoy people. Like they don't think about running the business or the financial piece, right? So I think that's great where you come in. I noticed that you have something called a cleanup and catch-up service. So can you explain what that includes and how do you determine the scope and pricing of that?
That's a challenge actually. Most people, so I do offer that as a one-off, but most people I'm working with are coming to me because they've either been DIYing their books and kind of just are over it because they're, wanting to spend more time doing other aspects of the business, like maybe coaching their own classes or, so forth, but just kind of overwhelmed. And then I've got a combination of people who have maybe worked with a bookkeeper that's kind of lapsed, or for whatever reason it wasn't a great fit. And so generally with anyone I'm onboarding, there's some type of cleanup work involved, which would usually be the first part, and it really lets me have a familiarity with their books. Now, there could also be cleanup work that I would do just more a la carte for someone specifically who's moving towards a specific thing, like selling their business, or of course during tax season trying to get ready for their books to go to their tax preparer, CPA, so forth. So I really kind of dive in, and generally if you want to think of a cleanup for kind of like, we're talking about like a small business, so not a huge, gigantic company would probably take more effort, but for each month you're behind, I kind of ballpark that as you're looking around $300 for services to just clean that, move forward, get everything reconciled. Again, that wouldn't include, like, we're not going to reinvent the system as part of that. It's kind of, especially if you're preparing for a specific event like a sale or taxes, it's like, you want to get it to cleaned up, kind of good enough, but you're not completely reworking the books at that point. point. So it does usually kind of involve the first month, couple weeks of work with someone, and then again, like ballparking that at around a cost of about, for each little company, about $300 for the months of catch up.
Really reasonable. So just maybe start with where they're at and then go from there.
Yeah, and it is great if I am onboarding someone for my monthly services. It kind of allows me to dive into their books as well, really see understand what's happening, fit them into the appropriate ongoing package, as well as get a familiarity with how they're running their business and what types of challenges they're having and the kind of overall flow. So it's a great way to, if you are onboarding someone, getting to know their business a little bit in more depth than just having the initial conversation with them, obviously.
Excellent. Well, thank you for that. Valerie, in your business planning and strategy session, what kind of financial issues or growth obstacles do you commonly help clients with?
Well, the one thing that I've found that small business owners, when I'm working with them directly, and particularly this is something that does apply to the fitness industry, there's always a question of cash flow and revenue, but more specifically cash flow. Do I have enough cash flow to keep this business going? What can I expect for my upcoming revenue? And a lot of small business owners, maybe they can do a little bit with their own books, but I've noticed that they kind of have a hard time making this leap to how can I realistically, of course, we can't really predict the future, but how can I realistically start planning for example, can I afford to hire another employee? What is that going to do to my bottom line? What is that going to do to, am I going to be able to afford it even cash flow wise? Are my books going to look off because I'm not getting now the revenue is, the net revenue is going to be down. So I really start with kind of a cash flow and revenue forecasting. And then also from the other side, just the expense side, planning for, if someone does need to make a larger purchase, an equipment purchase, or has some big expenses coming down the pike, such as hiring someone, but also just, their rent's going to increase. I worked with a business owner a couple of months ago who was looking to see if it was a viable option to renew a current lease. The lease was going up a little bit. The common area maintenance, the cams are going up. Could she afford this in the future? Did it make sense? And so we did some forecasting based on her current expenses and expected revenue from the membership. And does that really pencil out? And so it's kind of helping people understand how we can use their, bookkeeping is about what happened in accounting in the past, right? So it's like a historical kind of recap, organized manner. And then you have this other piece, well, how can we use that historical information to help you forecast in a semi-realistic and applicable way for the future? So it's kind of translating that information from the past to how do we use it to move forward and understand what could be some scenarios that would be realistic for the business.
So just to summarize, that sounds like you're creating a financial roadmap so that your clients can be successful.
Yeah, I really try to help with that. Yeah, an area in my position before this where we had to be pretty strict about understanding our cash flow, and we had to match pretty close to our budget. So always looking to the future, and really again would like to help business owners be able to kind of grow that skill and that outlook in their own business. So yeah, exactly. Roadmap for the future is a good way to put it.
I love that. That's such a great point, because oftentimes they don't know, when we talk to business owners, they don't understand their cash flow and how to grow their business. So I think it is great that you identify, here are the key items and this is where you can grow. And so that's really important. I guess the other thing is, after they engage for a new client, when they're engaging in your services, what is the typical timeline for that cleanup or getting that books to a usable state?
Well,
yeah.
Oh, sorry. I kind of think of if we're looking to do something like on an ongoing basis, or, obviously with taxes, sometimes there's a deadline involved. I really try to, and not like I'm working on it straight, but what I would think would be a realistic time frame is about a month, 3 weeks to a month. By the time we go back and forth, we kind of get in there, and depending on the size of the books, but like to do that as kind of the first month of service, and then, go from there into more of just the maintenance mode, which is, a little bit more, it's kind of fun to get the books all organized and cleaned up and ready to go. But then, the maintenance is where now you can start like actually using the data and kind of understanding in real time what's happening with your business.
And that is so great to know, just because we have clients who are ready to sell, but then the books aren't in order. So that's a great opportunity for us to refer them to someone like you who can get in and look at where the state of their, books are, and then help get that. cleaned up.
Yeah, no, that's a key piece, right? Anyone that's doing their due diligence, I'm sure anyone working with you is going to want clean financials so they can really understand the true value of the business. I also have a situation, I am working with someone who's thinking of selling their business down the line, and they kind of have three different, let's say, departments or service areas, not a fitness industry person, but more wellness business. And there's a certain area of the business and aspect that they might want to carve out and keep that as a separate piece. And so she needed help showing the last few years of history without that actual department or service offering included, because that's something that she wants to carve out and not sell. So that was another kind of interesting, just going back through, and we didn't redo all her books, but tried to use a realistic estimate based on the percentage of revenue expenses that we see now to kind of, go back and say, like, well, if this piece would have been carved out, like, this is the remaining part of the business that you'll actually be purchasing.
Yeah, that sounds a lot easier to do than it actually is, because we sold a business earlier this year that had three divisions. They wanted to keep two and sell one, but they had a lot of employees working on all three divisions, and it wasn't as clear cut as that. So one of the things that we had to do was properly allocate the expense, which I'd rather stab myself in the eye with a dull fork than do that again. But the advice I would give is, it is really hard. So as you're preparing to do that, to get 1 year of tax returns under your belt, that will force you to separate the businesses and therefore get clear line of sight on the revenues and the expenses, what personnel goes with that side of the business. It just helps in so many ways. And then one of the biggest ways it helps is it makes your business more lendable. So if you want to carve out a small part of the business or any part, tax returns, the other alternative, and it's going to be hard, but for more years, is to get audited financial statements for multiple years, and that can be extremely expensive. And then most likely for most Main Street businesses, you will be selling it to somebody who's going to need to finance that through the SBA. That would be very helpful. So this business, ultimately, we had offers from 1 million to 2.7 million.
Oh, wow.
It limited us in some of the structures we could do because of financing. So had we had audited financial statements, or better yet, a year's worth of taxes, which I recommended, but that didn't work out, then I think we could have appealed to a larger pool, gotten the seller more money. So having good books and records in this situation, I would counsel your client to file 2025 separately.
That makes sense.
Yeah, that's a good
Yeah, the tax returns, they're so important, right? We think of them as something you have to kind of get stuff together for once a year, but that's really the kind of backbone of, where your finances are. And it's really important, I know, for lending, but also just when I get started with a client too, I always ask them, like, can I see your tax return? If you filed your last filed tax return, then we really know, like, what your business, where we're starting. Like, that's kind of the litmus test almost of where you're actually at with your business, according to, hopefully accurate information you're filing with the government every year.
Yeah.
Hopefully, yeah. I mean, and oftentimes, business owners, they're so passionate about the work, like what we talked about earlier, but the struggles with that administrative side or the financial side. So when you're working with business owners, what are the biggest challenges you see them face when getting the financials in order?
I just think that people have, especially people in a small business, I would say, I understand too, because I like accounting. I don't like marketing, but here I find myself as a new business practice owner having to learn all this stuff about marketing. And yes, you can get help with some of it, and you have to, but of course now I'm like, well, I'm gonna do this myself and start and just, read a book or listen to some podcasts, and then I start doing it. And I think a lot of business owners, they start and they're like, well, QuickBooks, for example, is pretty easy. Like, it's meant for the lay person kind of who doesn't like or understand accounting in a real in-depth way. So they kind of like get basic startup, get their bank's account set up, and then start kind of going themselves. And then they'll find out, like, well, I kind of thought I could keep up with this, but it was okay for a while, but then I got busy and I don't really like doing it. So I put it in the back burner, and then now my taxes were due. And then, like, I filed an extension, but now I've got, instead of like keeping up with doing it myself, now I kind of like, it's like stressing me out and I'm like 8 months behind. And so I think there's kind of this with, especially temptation with small business owner, it's like, well, just get started and do it myself and it'll be good enough. And then it just like kind of starts, snowballing and they don't really want to deal with it, which I don't blame them. I mean, it
Yeah.
sounds like a lot of other things are more interesting than dealing with little accounting transactions. And then there's some automation in QuickBooks, but a lot of times if it's not set up right, it's not really doing what you want. So I think just the kind of realization of maybe this isn't something I do want to focus on or handle myself, and kind of getting out of that kind of maybe hole a little bit that's been dug is a big challenge. The other thing is that QuickBooks is really easy for someone who doesn't really understand accounting in depth to use, but then you start looking at what QuickBooks is doing for you, right? It's one thing to categorize the transactions, but then you're only categorizing the transactions so you can get this financial information out and these reports. The two obviously main reports like balance sheet and profit and loss, and then again for your taxes. But if you start, then you start looking at those, and if you're not really understanding what those mean or how they apply directly to your business, then it can be hard to know like where to go, or can I afford this, or what should I spend my money on, or can I hire that other person. One of the things I like doing is I like really sitting down with a business owner and saying like, I know there's all this jargon and these things that aren't that fun to deal with, but let's talk about like, it's particularly starting with most people, like the balance sheet is, they're not looking at that all the time, although they should, but the profit and loss is like, what does this actually mean? What do these numbers mean? What do they mean for your business? Like, it's okay if you don't, exactly know the difference between gross revenue and net revenue and what's all involved. Like, let's talk about it in a real world way that's like not intimidating. And I think like people have gotten into where they think they own a business, so they should know that stuff. So they like maybe want to tell people that they don't really understand the reporting that's coming out of their accounting software package.
I love that. That's a great point, Valerie, because you're educating them, right? Let's go back to the basics, because, sometimes you want to run a business or you buy a business and you haven't learned the complexity. I mean, QuickBook is easy, but it could be quite complex if you don't understand it.
Yeah, and trust me, I don't understand all the marketing stuff, so I get it. That's, like I said, that's not my side of the business, so no judgment. It's just, let's make it make sense to the business owner so that they can more effectively focus on their business.
Valerie, when we first started our business, I did the books, I did the bookkeeping, and when things were slow, it was fine. But we have a bookkeeper now, and she's amazing. She's a lifesaver. She saved our financial life. But I think it just kind of comes down to making a decision. What is my highest and best use of my time? And can I get a return that exceeds the expense? And for most business owners, I think for all business owners, the cost of having a good bookkeeper is significantly less than the opportunity cost. If they're spending 10 hours a week doing bookkeeping, imagine if they called on, they did business development hours, and how much that could bring in. So that's ultimately, from my point of view, why I gave up the bookkeeping, is because I could do other things that I practically liked to do more on. And it was a better business decision and a better financial decision to let that part.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I know, again, as small business owners, we think we can try to do everything. And yeah, I was listening to a podcast from this woman called Studio CEO, and she works with specifically yoga business owners. And, a lot of, again, they're starting as a single, they love yoga, they want to start a yoga studio and be really involved with the people coming in and kind of do everything, but starting from a small space. And she was saying, it seems like as you expand your business a little bit, you might want to hire more, yoga instructors to actually expand your business. But what you really should look at is getting yourself out of the main operational space so that you can be the business owner that it seems like counterintuitive. You're hiring this other person that may not additionally be contributing to revenue directly right away, but they're taking care of the back office stuff. They might be also handling things like the accounting if they have that skill, but just cleaning, like making sure the bathrooms are clean, making sure the classes, somebody can't show up and be the instructor that day. So you kind of stop yourself from being the bottleneck, because there are other things that you point out that as the business owner are really more important for you to focus on to grow your business, rather than scrambling around and doing these other things. So I think for some of us, I know me, it's hard to let go of those type of things in my own business as well, the control, but also just realize like that's not the best use of time.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up, because scale a business, the business owner has to have time to work on growing their business. And,
Right.
being able to delegate and let some stuff go is super important that we see all the time as well. But let's say that a business owner feels uncomfortable about their books, or they want better clarity of how their business is operating. How do they get on track, or what should they do, and how do they reach you?
You mean someone that wants to maybe tackle it themselves starting with, or how would they engage a bookkeeper?
Well, they've tried that. Now they need you.
Okay.
How do they
They feel
get
like
started?
they need your services, yes.
Well, I'm on Instagram and LinkedIn. I also have a website, and so I try to be really approachable. I'm not a pushy person, so if we talk and you reach out to me through my website, which I'm guessing you can link to in the show notes, it's
We'll put it down here at the end.
eagleeye.com. Yeah, then I'm willing just to have a conversation and kind of see where you're at and try to find the best fit. Maybe it is just a one-time cleanup, but maybe you are looking to outsource or get rid of some of those monthly tasks. And I really try to tailor that to each individual person, although I have different types of service package levels. So yeah, a conversation is a good way to start and just see if it's a good fit, or if we maybe need to look at another service like going directly to a CPA for tax prep, so forth.
Well, thank you, Valerie. And before we wrap up, what final piece of advice would you offer business owners when they're looking to improve their financial management? I know for me, as an entrepreneur, we wear many hats and it's hard to let go of them. So what is your piece of advice?
I would say kind of like going to the gym, right? It's like we'd all love to like do, the workout like the day before the big event when we have to wear that like dress that we didn't fit into and lose all the weight in a day. But it's kind of like that. Maintenance is key, and I think that consistency is key, like in the gym, or like if you are trying to make improvements in your life, it's kind of keeping up on things and making sure things don't just, the most stressful is when you let it go too far, and then you're looking at you haven't filed taxes for 2 years, and you're looking at a couple months of somebody cleaning up your books exclusively just to get to the present day. So it's like, don't get too far behind before you realize it's maybe time to keep things kind of on a consistent basis.
Yeah, it's so important, and we're so happy to have you on the show, because I think the number one thing for business owners who want to sell their business and to get a fair to good price for their business and their life's work is to absolutely have good books and records. And I can't emphasize that enough. But working with a professional like you can really make their lives easier and their businesses much more sellable and worth more because of the clarity of the numbers and confidence that the buyers and the banks will have in their numbers.
Right. That is the name of the game, right? If you're selling your business or looking to work with lenders, you want to get as much as possible. And a very good point.
Yeah. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing your expertise today. And to our listeners out there, if you're in the fitness industry, yoga, wellness, and you need assistance with your financial, do not hesitate to reach out to Valerie and her team at Eagle Eye Accounting. And for more information to connect with Valerie, I believe your email is valerie@eagleeyeacct.com. And then your website again was www.eagleeyeaccountact.com. Right? I think I got it right.
Yeah, one last thing I would say is only fitness.
No.
She combines fitness with her account, bookkeeping, with business services, with her passion, which is fit. But you have a broad background, and I think most of the industries out there could give you a call and have you help them.
Yeah, that's right.
Thank you again, Valerie.
Thank you.